All right, kids are crazy, aren't they? Yeah. You know, we look at the state of society and we go, what's wrong? What's happened? Why is there so much disrespect for parents? Why aren't people more responsible? Let me just say to parents, your boys will always be boys unless you teach them to be men. Your girls will always be girls unless you teach them to be women. You can't change society, but you can impact your kids for growth. And you need to see yourself as a primary influencer in their lives. We welcome you to Grace Church, San Diego. It's great to be an American. If you feel that way, say amen. Amen. Yeah. I know that there are Christians all over the world, but there is no place on this planet like this country. And I'm not going to do a rah-rah America speech, but man, I sure want to. We're glad you're here. Welcome to those online. We welcome you as well. Hope you had a great 4th of July weekend. I barbecued so much and ate so much. I don't really feel like being here right now. I just need to go lay down and sleep, but we're glad you're here. If you need a Bible, would you raise your hand? Our ushers love to give you a Bible to use during the service. I really want to get into this whole matter of parenting, but I thought I'd show you this picture. If you were wondering what a real man looks like, this is what a real man looks like. This is Pastor Jesse and little Bethany, and they're on a father-daughter date. Come on. Now, is that cute or what? You know, it's tough being a father. You know why it's tough being a father? Because you actually have to pretend that you care about your kids' stuff. Well, what I mean by that is like this. Like, I was over at Pastor Jesse's and Dez's house not too long ago, and Luke was there. Luke is their oldest son of 3. And little Luke fancies himself a preacher. You know, he kind of is mimicking his dad. And he stands on the fireplace and he stands there like it's a stage. And he, something along the line. You remember that series Freeway? This is what it sounds like with Luke preaching. Freeway, and I'm looking at them and they're just like this. Our child is so amazing. I'm going, the kid can't even speak. But for them, it was awesome. After that, he said, watch him lead worship. Go ahead. So he leads worship. He takes these 2 drumsticks and he just starts beating on the fireplace, this clanging sound on the metal protector there, and he's just beating on that. And they're just, again, he's a worshiper, and he's just banging. I'm like, can anybody stop him right now? Parents have to pretend they love this stuff, but actually they love it. We love our kids' stuff, and do you ever have a 3-year-old? How many have had or have a 3-year-old? Okay. There is something crazy with a 3-year-old. They're learning to be potty trained, and they're so proud of themselves, they will actually bring you into the bathroom and go, look what I did. And you have to go, wow, that's amazing. And you're really talking about something that's natural and normal. And we just love our kids, and we have to, give them encouragement. That's an excellent little poopy, Johnny, and that's how we do it. But anyway, I want to talk about parenting styles before we get into Hebrews chapter 12. If you have your Bible there, turn to Hebrews chapter 12. I kind of want to finish what I was talking about last week out of Hebrews 12, how God actually parents us. He is a father to us, and how he trains us and develops us, and we learn a lot from him. There are 4 kinds of parenting styles I want to present. One is permissive, a permissive parent, an uninvolved parent, an authoritarian parent, and then the 4th one is a collaborative parent. And I want to explain these because if you see yourself as a primary influencer in your child's life, now there's other influences, and you don't have the only influence, but you are the primary. One word from you will override 20 words from some goofy child they meet in school who tells them the wrong things. Your words matter. And it's important for us to understand. Before we get into these styles, let me just share with you how important it is for you to understand that this difference between being a listener and a lecturer is so important. If you are a lecturer, I can tell you right now, you are a lazy parent. I am a lecturer, and so I don't want to beat up on you. I have a tendency, I'm a preacher by heart, and so I'm not a great listener. I want to be. My children, I would rather give them direction and lecture them. They do something wrong, I lecture them. But in order to be a very good parent, a great parent, you've got to be a listener. You've got to know what does he want? What are his values? When you're talking to a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old, do you know those values? Do you know what those values really are of that child? Can you shape a child if you don't know them? You need to listen. If you're a lecturer, you're not listening. Your child isn't learning. Your child is reacting to what you're saying. So I want to get into these parenting styles. The first one is an uninvolved parent. In each one of these, I will talk about approach and impact as you see in your outline. But I also want to talk about the underlying assumption that goes with this. It's a really important thing to understand that we have some assumptions. The first thing is an uninvolved parent has an approach that gives no direction. We're just simply not involved. We don't really understand our role as a parent. We assume that the child can self-teach. The child will see what we do and do what we do. It's not going to happen. You've got to be hands-on. And the problem is when they become an adult, the impact will be that they will be a manipulative adult. And the reason they become a manipulative adult is because they have felt abandoned, so they're constantly chasing the affections of other people, other adults, even in their marriage, even their parenting. They've got to have an involved parent. The next one is a permissive parent. The approach gives a little bit of direction, not the approach of no direction, but gives little direction. Here's the assumption. The assumption is that kids know best. They know what's best for them. Let them think for themselves. Well, that's awesome. The problem is they don't think for themselves. You need to shape their worldview. You need to shape what they do and how they think. The impact will be that as an adult, they'll be very demanding of other people, whereas the uninvolved parent produces an adult that will be manipulative. When you're not involved, when you're permissive, your child is going to be demanding because they believe they're the center of the universe. And they're going to demand that everybody perform for them. They're going to demand that people perform for their benefit. They're going to look for entitlements in their life. The third one is an authoritarian parent. The approach is that it gives dogmatic direction. Boy, do I lean on this side. I wish I didn't. I wish I could be that really wonderful parent. My wife is a great parent, and thank God, because our kids would be a mess. But, that dogmatic, this is the way it is, you do it this way, and when they don't perform, you come down on them, and you're constantly in a power struggle. And even if they submit to you, you're still, at best, getting someone who is submissive to your actions or your directives, but not really with a heart being transformed. The assumption is that kids know nothing. Well, the problem with that is it's just not true. Kids do know things. You need to respect them. You need to honor them as human beings. And the best way to do that is to listen to them. The problem is they also, just like the permissive parents, they produce adults who are very demanding. Now, their demanding approach is a little more dogmatic because they saw you do that. The fourth style is collaborative, and I believe this is the ultimate style of a parent. And I want you to see this because the approach is you give informed direction. Now, when I say you give informed direction, you're actually informing them based on what they know and what they don't know, what their values are and what their values are deficit and good. And so we begin to listen to our child and responsively develop them. And the neat thing about that is, as an adult, they will be self-controlled. They will not look to other people to contribute to their worth. They will see their worth based on the fact that they were respected as a child growing up, and they will learn the value They will learn the value of good reasoning in a worldview that has been developed by a godly parent. So here's the problem. We have this thing called a fool's choice. And the fool's choice is we think there's only two options, either increased control or increased acceptance. And so we're constantly vying for accepting that child. We're constantly, on the other hand, looking to control that child. The problem is that's the fool's choice. There's actually a third option. And that third option is as a collaborative parent. So you're collaborating with your child. You're teaching them, you're growing them. And what produces is a self-controlled adult who has respect. Not only respect for you, but respect for privacy, respect for property, respect for human value. And so the choice is not, did I accept my child enough? Did I control my child enough? The question is, have I instilled respect in them? Now, when we talk about our attitude toward the child, either accepting or either controlling, the result will be the child will respond to this, and each one of these has a possible unintended consequence in each one of these. The first unintended consequence is an uninvolved parent will get rejected by his children. When they grow up, they will reject their parents. I've seen it happen over and over again. They're wanting acceptance, but because they're not involved, there is resentment and then rejection of that parent. The second one is that if you're a permissive parent, you're going to get an adult who disrespects you, is not going to respect who you were because you were too permissive. I think that sometimes parents are trying to so much get the acceptance from their kids that they end up getting disrespect from their kids. What about an authoritarian? The problem with authoritarian is it produced an adult that fears those parents and fears authority. And that fear is not a healthy emotional state nor a healthy spiritual state. But I love what happens with a collaborative parent, one who is listening, responding, developing, and shaping, is that there is respect to the parent. That child will respect you. And I know that you want acceptance, and I know you want friendship, but I got to tell you something. The most important thing that you can instill in your child is respect. And the only way you can do that is to avoid being authoritarian, avoid being uninvolved, avoid being permissive, and be collaborative. Listen, don't lecture. Your problem will be that you will fail. It'll either be disrespect or you'll be rejected. They will fear you. But what you really want is the respect of your child. And this is the only way that you will get it, is when you get into that real powerful interaction with a child collaboratively. The reason I bring these styles up is because I want you to see the style that God uses. He uses a collaborative style of shaping us. Now, whether you're a parent or not, this is going to be important for you to get a hold of, because if you understand these principles, you will understand how to shape your child, but you'll understand how God is shaping you. If you're leading a team at work, if you have people that are responsible for you, or you're leading some kind of a team, if you do not collaborate with that team, you will never get them to develop in the way that you want. So don't use the authoritarian style. Don't be uninvolved. Be very involved and listen to your team. Listen to your kids. There's two aspects that God does in terms of shaping us. And that is the approach he uses on us and the impact. The approach, first of all, he trains us and accepts us. Look at Hebrews 12:7 and 8. It is for discipline that you have endured. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? If you are left without discipline, in which all of us have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. This word discipline, we started talking about it last week, and this word discipline is so important. Padia means to train a child. But I thought I would get into this a little bit more. You know, if you've been in a really good job, where you have all your education, you're ready to go, and you come in, you still need to learn how to function within that job. If this company that you work for is an effective company, they will have what's called an apprenticeship. You need to apprentice your kids. This is what God does for us. The word paideia simply means to train. It's an apprenticeship. And let me take you through 4 things that happens in an apprenticeship. The first one is this. It's called demonstration. So if you are a carpenter, you will take a journeyman carpenter, and you will have him watch you. You will demonstrate how you finish off. If you're going to do some routing or if you're going to do some finish work, you're going to show him how to do it. You're going to demonstrate. Now, I don't mind doing that part. That's natural and intuitive for me. I'm a teacher. The problem is the next step, and that is you direct them. And so what you do is you direct them to do exactly what you just did. And they actually have hands-on experience. Now, what you do is when you direct them, you do the third thing, which is you monitor their actions. I had a wood shop teacher who was amazing. I think his name was Mr. Smith, and he would teach like this, All right, kids, he was missing one finger. Have you ever seen a shop teacher who didn't miss a finger? Anyway, this guy, don't do like I did, and he's missing this little finger. Anyway, so that shop teacher would take and he would show us what to do, the whole class. And then he would get us doing it on our individual stations, and then he would monitor what we're doing. And he'd go around and go, no, wait, not like that. Okay, take it like this, and then hold it back like that. Keep your finger out of there. He said, keep your finger out of there. And, and then you're simply learning. And then the fourth aspect of apprenticeship is encouragement. Not so much accountability, but encouragement. So you're encouraging that student to say, you can do this. There's hope for change. There's hope for excellence, and you can grow. That's exactly what parents do. So you demonstrate, you model, you direct them, you then monitor their behavior and their actions, and then you encourage them. You can do better. You can become excellent. That is what a powerful parent does. That's what a powerful leader does. The second thing about God's input into our life is not only does he discipline us, but God is treating you as sons. Every one of us is a son of God. That's not a gender issue. That is a progenitor issue in the language of the New Testament. A progenitor is the oldest son. God sees you as the oldest son. Ladies, you are sons of God. You have the authority under a Jewish system. You have the authority of an adult, mature son who is in control of the inheritance. And God is shaping you to control the inheritance. God sees you with tremendous respect. He treats you as sons. We need to understand this as parents, that treating our kids well. The word treating literally means prospero. The Greek word means to bear forward collaboratively. In other words, what you're doing is you are working with that child, shaping that child, listening, interacting, and you are treating them not like a little kid that can't think, but whatever stage they are, you're collaborating with them and bringing them along. That's what God does to you. So he looks at your speed of growth and he responds. He looks, for some of us, we grow quickly. For some of us, we grow really slowly. Some of us are stubborn. I don't know anybody like that, but some people are stubborn. And when they're stubborn, God just slowly, patiently shapes us, calls us on our stubbornness. Some of us are very compliant, and God uses that compliance to shape us. And all I'm saying is that God is a responsive leader, treating you as a son. The option is, notice, if he doesn't treat you as a son, for what son is there whom the father does not discipline? If you are left without discipline, that uninvolved parent in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate. You're counterfeit children. You are not real sons. You can be a child of God. You can be an immature, ill-functioning, unhealthy child of God. But if you want to be a mature son, you're going to listen to the input of God. You're going to get into his word, and his word is going to instruct you, and he's going to apprentice you, if that's a word. And he takes you and shapes you into the adult son, and you can't be a parent. You can't be a parent unless you discipline your kids. To fail to discipline your kids is to nullify your role as a parent. You can't be a leader in your business if you fail to shape and correct your team members. Every one of us has influence, and with the people with whom we have influence, we need to shape them and treat them as sons. We need to respect them and honor them and correct them. Well, finally, I want to talk about the impact of what God is doing. And there's three things that are the impact of God's skilled training of us as a father. The first one is personal endurance. The second one is dynamic growth, an active dynamic growth. And the third one is that we actually begin to participate with our Heavenly Father. So you want to look at these three with you. In verse 7 and 8 of Hebrews 12, it says, it is for discipline, which we just talked about, that you have to endure. You see, there's something about discipline, inherent within discipline. That training produces endurance. The word endurance here literally means to abide under, hupomeno. It literally means to settle down and relax under. I have a friend who has since passed. He was an older guy who was in World War II. He was a pilot, and his name was Klein. Klein was an awesome guy, one of the most gentle spirits I've ever known. But man, when he got in a plane, he had an old P-51 after World War II. And he was a crop duster, by the way. Didn't use the P-51 for that. But the P-51 was his toy. And he said, hey, you want to go up in the P-51? And I said, you know, I've seen you fly. You don't just fly straight line. You do circles and stuff like that. I said, I get a little motion sick. Just thinking about it makes me nauseated, you know. And he said, no, you'll be all right. Oh, that was a mistake. I crawled into that back of that cockpit, which, by the way, very claustrophobic. In a P-51, there's no room for a big guy. And he got up there and he goes, okay, we're going to do a roll. And I said, okay. And he did this roll. And my stomach at the end of that was twisted around. And then he said, we're going to do a loop. And I'm like, let's not do the loop. And before I could say it, I could feel those G's on me, and my stomach went to a place I can't even tell you. And I couldn't find my stomach until we came out of the loop, and then I found it, and it was in a bag. But I'm telling you, I couldn't do it. He said, look, hey, you'll get used to this. I said, I'm not getting used to it. He said, you got to fly several times, and you get used to it. He said, look, the next time I take you up, you'll only throw up a couple of times. It won't be a problem. By the time you're up the fifth, sixth time, you'll be able to endure it. You'll be fine. Well, I never did, so the illustration falls apart. But the reality is that these guys that do it, time after time, that experience, you get used to the G's, you get used to the motion, and you begin to endure. That's what discipline does. Discipline trains us not to get comfortable and not for relief, but for endurance. And good parents teach their kids not to live for comfort, not to live for relief, but to live for endurance. Because there are many things that are going to come into their lives that are going to be so difficult. And if you train them properly, you discipline them properly, you give them a good apprenticeship when they're growing up, respecting them as a human being, teaching them interactively and collaboratively, honoring them as sons, and understanding their ability to learn from the greatest influencer in their life. That's you. It's a powerful thing. The next thing that he teaches is dynamic growth. Notice what it says in verse 10. For this discipline is for us a short time as it seems best, But his discipline, he's talking about our earthly fathers, but God's discipline for us is for our good, that we may share in his holiness, for our good. And you say, well, what is that? Our moral good? Is that our fulfilled righteousness? What is that? The interesting word translated good is from the Greek. It's the word sumphero, and it simply means to bring together, to bear together. And the idea is that we take the knowledge. You see, instructing your kids is not enough. Giving them knowledge is not enough. Knowledge doesn't change people. But when knowledge is synthesized, the word sumphero means to bring together, to synthesize truth. So now we take truth, facts, and we begin to synthesize them into what's called understanding. You see, knowledge is one thing, but when we pull that knowledge together and we understand the application of life, we have what the Bible calls understanding. Sunethis, which is simply a pulling together of truth. And you see, when he disciplines us for our pulling together of truth, for our understanding. And I'll tell you something about a child that learns as they're growing up. It's not just facts, it's how facts work out in a practical understanding. And guess what? The end result, knowledge, understanding, and understanding produces wisdom. And wisdom is the power source of endurance. You see, you got to take them through that process. It's everyday interactive. Know what they're thinking, know what they're feeling, know how they're shaping, and don't panic, respond. This is exactly what God does for us. And then in verse 10, finally, he gives us the third point, and we participate with our Heavenly Father. Notice the discipline for us is for our good, for our understanding, producing wisdom, that we may share in his holiness. That we may share his holiness. We actually bring together into our life the very holy nature of God to participate with him. You know, I think of endurance, and, you know, life can be very long, life can be short. 3 weeks ago, by the way, I found out, I think it was 3 weeks ago, that Ruth Brown, who's here in the back right here, turned 99. Is that right, Ruth? Did you turn 99 a few weeks ago? Now, come on, let's give her a hand. I've known Ruth a long time, and I have watched that steady commitment to God. And I remember her dear husband and her were committed to the Gideons, and they did it day after day, year after year. You remember that, Ruth? Of course you do. And that commitment and made a difference. Why? Where does that come from? That's called character. That's character. You see, you can develop character, and sharing in God's holiness takes time. And it takes consistent listening and abiding with your kids to get them to understand the value of developing and growing. If you have small kids, be diligent. If you have adult kids, it's not too late. Be a collaborator with your adult kids. I have children. On July 23rd, my oldest child will turn 40. On July 17th, my youngest will turn 13. Oh, Lord. And each one of these kids, I have different levels of relationship, and it's all collaborative. They're all different. All 7 kids think differently, act differently, and I'm watching God shape them, and I'm trying to listen and learn from them who they are and what they think, because I want them to share in God's holiness that we showed up there a minute ago. God's holiness is the character outflow. You can have that. You know, the whole matter of holiness begins with faith in Jesus Christ. In Romans chapter 3, let me read a few verses out of Romans 3 as I close. But now the righteousness of God has been manifest. The righteousness of God is through faith in Jesus Christ for all who believe. For there's no difference, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. You see, this is what he's saying. God will give to us his righteousness. He will give to us his holiness. It all begins with faith. It all begins with realizing I'm a sinner just like that. There's no difference between any of us. We all need Jesus. And when we believe in him, he imputes to us, he gives to us his holiness, his righteousness. And that's that first step of participating in the holiness of God. Would you bow your head?